heard that, right?
Kick it back on, dude. It pegged red. As soon as he turned his camera off, it pegged red. Let you guys see it. It was pretty cool. There it is. There it goes. There it goes. There it goes. There it goes. You see it, Jeff?
I see it.
It's not necessarily a paranormal investigation, and we caught something on film the first time. It's got to go in, man.
Wow.
I love the peaceful action of a good cast. The catching of a brook trout in a small stream. But there have been times when that tranquil nature disappears in a split second. I had an experience in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park where everything changed in a heartbeat. The peaceful, tranquil nature I was experiencing went away just like that. And I went from a peaceful, transforming, therapeutic session to adventure and suspense before I could blink an eye.
Let me tell you something that happened October of 2022. I do some trout fishing in Forney Creek with some really dear friends of mine. And so I was coming in a couple of days later since they were there. They were there, set up in their campsite. I parked my car on the road to nowhere. Road to nowhere, it comes out of Bryson City, comes into a tunnel. You walk through the tunnel and poof, the Smoky Mountains are there and all its majesty and all its wilderness. And the further you go back through the tunnel, the more wild it gets. So I had one goal, well, I had a couple goals, but my main goal for that weekend was to go and visit the Woody Cemetery, which is on a place called Gray Wolf Creek. But I was going to meet my friends on Forney Creek. We got there. My plan was to set up, fish with them for a day, and then spend a couple of days in Forney Creek by myself, just fishing, exploring some waters I hadn't fished in a while. And then make sure that I went to the Woody Cemetery. From what I understand, there were a lot of my kinfolk were buried in there from the 1800s, and I wanted to see it. I just wanted to see it.
Yeah, be careful coming down through here, man. I should catch some fish right here. I'm gonna try to get on these rocks right here and throw it up in there, but we'll see. Nice little rainbow. It was not little. It fought like a wild fish fought. It took it up there in that waterfall right up there. And we had to get it. There's just no way to get to that fish up through there. I'd have to climb down those rocks, and that's probably not the best way to do it. It's a nice stocked rainbow. Now that's about average size for when you get them in here. They're fun to catch, that's for sure. But that's the type of fish we'll catch up through here, those and big browns. And a lot of people don't come up this far. They fish down there in the section that we just fished and then stop, go down, but they don't really come up these steep banks and steep trails very much. I've seen people fishing up here before, but not very many.
So I spent the first night, sat around the campfire, talking, just having a good time. Next morning, I walked them to their boats. They got in their boats, went back across Lake Fontana, waved goodbye, immediately got right in the creek. So I got in where Fontana Lake comes into, where Forney Creek comes into Fontana Lake, and started fishing Forney Creek up past the campground, and I was going to fish it all day long. So I fished up past the campground, walked about another, I think it's about 4/10 of a mile up to where Bear Creek Trail comes in from the left. You go across the bridge, and there's an island in Forney Creek right there where Forney Creek splits, comes back in right at the bridge. Bear Creek comes in from the west into Forney Creek right about, I'm gonna say right about here. I think that's Bear Creek Trail right there. Busted through some brush for about 15, 20 yards, got down into the water and started fishing. Caught a fish or two, nothing to write home about, but I missed a couple, caught a fish or two. Not far into the fishing trip right there, I started hearing a noise coming from my left on an elevated plateau above the creek. And I didn't think anything of it. It was so evident and clear that it was a group of, I thought it might have been a family, because I heard distinct noises of children laughing, kind of like they would be singing and dancing around a campfire, like families would do in any type of camping scenario. So I didn't even think about it. I just knew that's what it was. Now, sometimes in a river we have, I call them river voices. Sometimes the creek coming over the rocks, you can hear like a whisper. You know, you get used to that. You know it, you know what it is, and it's a voice. It's nothing, it's no big deal. But this is not what I heard. I heard legitimate children, happy children, frolicking.
If you've ever been stung by a jellyfish, just a slight sting in the ocean, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is a plant called stinging nettle. If you're ever walking through the forest with shorts and you brush up against this plant, you see there's little thorns, little bitty stingers on the underside of the leaf, on the stalk. And it feels like a tiny, slight jellyfish sting. Not bad, but it's enough to irritate you. And usually, when you find stinging nettle, you find other plants associated with something that might harm you. I'm not saying stinging nettle will harm you. As a matter of fact, stinging nettle is one of the most nutritious plants you can eat out here, especially in a tea. If you've got a cold, things like that, people love nettle tea. But as you can see right here, surrounded by the stinging nettle, you also got a lot of poison ivy. The 3 leaves right there. And many times, wherever there's stinging nettle, you'll find a plant we call jewelweed, and I'll show it to you in a minute. Generally, they grow in the same location. Jewelweed is a natural, I wouldn't call it a cure, but it's a relieving ointment that you can just rub up in your hands, rub it on whatever you got there, and it'll take it away. It'll take away the sting. It counteracts the acid and the poison ivy. The wind has started blowing downstream. It's gonna be a difficult cast. Let's see what I can do. Take it back through the trees, turn it left. There it is. One followed it a minute ago. Worried about that limb right there. Let's see if I can get it up. Boom, right there. That should be a fish. Oh, got it. And he went through the hole.
Nice fish.
Yeah.
Really nice fish. Alright, come here.
I think we used the net.
Yes. After.
Right about here, I immediately started hearing sounds like kids playing. So I didn't think anything of it. So I fished up a little bit more, heard it again. So I decided to go up, climb the little bank that was there, and go up and see this family up there camping because I knew they were there. And so I climbed up the bank, stuck my head over, nothing. There's nothing there. And it kind of, I still wasn't really spooked about it. I just thought it might have been someone down the creek or something like that. The sound had, but there was nobody in the campsite I'd left. I was the only one there, and I was trying to figure if I'd seen anybody. Had not. So I climbed back down in the water, started fishing again. And I came up to, there was a log across the creek that I climbed up over and sat down on that log. And when I sat down on the log, I was just sitting there, looked over to my right, and a beach, like a sandy beach, had developed in the bend of the stream. When we went back, it had been washed away, the sand was no longer there, but at that point it was a sandy beach. It was 10, 15 feet across, like this, like an oval beach. 15, 20 feet long ways, 10, 15 feet across. And I looked down, I saw a footprint there. And I was like, well, okay, that's kind of, I love to track. I like to go see, especially see if I can figure out how old that footprint is. I can tell by the deterioration of the sides of the track. You can come up with some type of algorithm in your head, how old it is, how long ago was that print made. So I walked over to it, I climbed out off the log, walked over to it, looked down at it, and what struck me about the footprint was how small it was. Okay, well that's either a lady or that's a child. And I was like, I thought it was fairly new. It didn't look like it had been, had been there very long. And I was like, well, that's a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird. I haven't seen anybody else. Then something strange hit me. Very strange. There was only one footprint in the middle of that beach, just one. So I said, okay, there's gotta be it. So I circled it looking for another footprint. There was none, there was not another footprint. At this point, I'm trying to figure this out. It's a mystery. And when you get a mystery, you gotta solve it. So I said, okay, let me ponder this for a little bit. And so I went back to fishing. Just a few minutes later, the sound of the kids frolicking came back over the same ridge that I'd investigated a little bit before. I said, so I got to get to the bottom of this. I've got to get to the bottom of this. back to the creek. I remember getting halfway, 3/4 away to the other bank. The water was low, because I could, you know, when you get in there real high, it's kind of hard to navigate right there. But it was fairly easy to navigate that stream. And as I started following that sound to go find out what it was, and I took a step, and the sound that was in front of me did a 180 and came from behind me. I remember turning, looking back, and going, and I could hear it in that island. And that island was just nothing but rhododendron. You could get through it, but there was no way, in my belief, that there could be kids out there dancing and singing. It was impossible. So still, I said, okay, I'm just going to go back to my campsite and think about this for a while. I sat down in my camp chair and was about to doze off. I remember just sitting there. He didn't have any arms, so I remember sitting there like this. And it was, at this point, it was in twilight. The sun was not down, it was the beginning of twilight. And 2 park rangers walk into my campsite. And I remember like looking up, and these 2 park rangers are coming up from the lake, walking into my campsite. And I remember looking at them because it kind of surprised me. And I remember saying to them,
What I owe the pleasure of you guys being out here at Sunday night at dark.
Oh, we're just out here checking up on folks.
I kind of giggled, very lighthearted. They asked me what my name was and those type of things. And then the one park ranger asked me, do you have your reservation? And I said, yeah, I've got it, but I don't have a copy. I have a copy of my phone, I believe. She said, well, you need to go get it now. I was like, oh, okay, I'll go get it now. You know? And so I went over, and when I stood up, I carry a big buck knife on my hip. When I stood up and they saw the buck knife, they both got in a defensive posture. And when I say defensive posture, like they were ready for anything. And it went from no pressure whatsoever to high pressure, just like that. And they said, sir, whatever you do, do not put your hand on your weapon. And I remember I looked at them and said, why would I do that? And they just said, just go get show me your reservation. Went over, fumbled around a little bit, produced my phone. I said, it's in here. She goes, bring it to me. And it was in a very forceful voice. So I brought it to her. We talked a little bit. She started quizzing me on everything about my reservation, where I parked, what kind of car I had, made sure my name was what it was. They may do that with everybody, I don't know. And then they asked me what my tag number was. And I said, well, I don't know what my tag number is. You know, at this point, I'm actually want to ask them to show me their identification at this point. You just didn't want to get to this point. And we had some other questions, some other things were said. Finally broke it down a little bit, and they said, okay, everything checks out. And I remember asking, is there anything going on here? And what they told me was,
well, I think it'd be a good idea if you want to home tonight. It's not safe out here by yourself.
And left it at that. I was like, okay, all right. And so we said goodbyes, and I sat back down in my camp chair, and I started thinking about the weird encounter I had up the creek with what I don't know, have no idea what it was, had no idea what it could be. And then the park rangers come in and tells me to be careful and be, you know. So I, being of sound mind and spirit, packed my stuff up and got out of there. Now, I'll go back to the first of the story. My goal was to see the cemetery.
I'm thinking that right here where this creek comes in, some of these delayed harvest fish may be congregating in here. So we'll see. Let's see what happens. They're kind of like swimming up to it and then right the last second, just turning away. They've been bitten 2 or 3 times a day or something. These fish were put in here in this lower level stream, in this delayed harvest stream, about 2 weeks ago. And so it's allowed them to become a little bit more stream-wise. And they're not as quick to bite as they were that first week. So right now they're kind of looking at it a little more because they've been fished here all day long. What I'm doing is I'm throwing it around that tree. See that tree right there? I can do it, but I'm trying to do it out and turn it back around in that hole. See how it does right there? And if it flows right in that spot, they're feeding right, that's their feeding lane right there. There it is. Woo! Hold them like this right there. See that? He's a live one. That was a nice size one right there. Oh, they're starting to forget I'm there. They try a couple more casts. See those bugs starting to come down the water? Night, they just started feeding.
Anybody had just gone through those last few hours by themselves in the wilderness probably wouldn't go into a cemetery at dark out in the wilderness. But that was my goal for being out there, was to go see the cemetery. From what I understand, there were a lot of my kinfolk were buried in there from the 1800s, and I wanted to see it. I just wanted to see it.
I had an experience where everything changed in a heartbeat.
I parked my car on the road to nowhere, not far into the fishing trip. I started to hear a noise. Sometimes the creek coming over the rocks, you can hear like a whisper. But this is not what I heard. I heard children laughing. So I decided to go up, climb the little bank that was there, stuck my head over, nothing. There's nothing there. And I remember looking up, and these 2 park rangers are coming up from the lake, walking into my campsite. And when I stood up and they saw the buck knife, they both got in a defensive posture. The weird encounter I had up the creek with what I don't know what it was. And then the park rangers come in and tells me to be careful. So I packed my stuff up and got out of there. Now I'll go back to the first of the story. My goal was to see the cemetery.
My name is Joe Woody. I've been an avid fly fisherman in these Appalachian Mountains for the past 25 years.
There it is. Woo! Got it. Oh, he's colored up beautiful.
And in that time, I've not only heard about some interesting stories, but also encountered some unforgettable situations myself.
I don't remember where he went. He was gone. Who am I talking to? First of all, who am I talking to? God?
So come along the journey with me as we dive deeper into these stories of forgotten streams of Appalachia.
We can't put that in there, Josh.
Anybody had just gone through those last few hours by themselves in the wilderness probably wouldn't go into a cemetery at dark out in the wilderness. But that was my goal for being out there, was to go see the cemetery. So I hiked back, it's about a mile, took a left up the trail, up the ridgeline, dropped my pack on the picnic tables that they have there, and went back because it was fairly steep hike up to the cemetery. I'd never been there, but it looked fairly steep at the time. So I got back on the trail, took a right, and when I took a right, the frolicking kids sound came back from the ridge line where the cemetery was supposed to be. And I was, at that point, I just picked up my pack, walked out in the dark. You know, I don't want to tell anybody that story. It's crazy. You don't want to sound like a crazy person.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about my philosophy about fishing in this hole. As you can tell, it's a hot day. It's a really hot day. And the fellow that was here before said he saw some fish hitting the top of the water right up there where it comes off the white water right there and swirls around, then it comes down here and swirls around. So my first attempt at catching something is tying a little elk hair caddis on top, then dropping off a little Griffith's net on the bottom of that, tie it with a surgeon's knot, and see if I can catch something on top. But quite frankly, that's just me trying to be difficult. I'd love to see something come up on top. I doubt it will. But what I'm going to do when I come down in this bigger hole is tie a big woolly booger on and drift it through there, pull it back and forth. I think I'll forego the Griffith's net right now, and I'll just do the little caddis fly. I'm going to fish the hole from left to right around, and I'll fish this top water up through there, over there, and right there to the edge. See what happens. The fishing hole in the quarters, I'm going to fish this left quarter up here, then fish that right quarter over there, then fish this third quarter right here, and then the fourth part of my fishing adventure, I'm going to try a woolly booger in that deep water. Get it down as deep as I can. See how that sun's shining right there on that hole? See if I can drop my fly up high. See that? Let it float down right on it. See that? Now it'd be beautiful if a fish actually hit that right now. Cinematic gold. Nothing yet. Fish might be a little spooked.
I looked up, and I remember I did a Google search. It said mythology, Cherokee voices in the forest. It was something to that extent. And up popped story after story after story, and I don't even know how to pronounce it. I think it's Nanenehi, which is a very strong reference, especially in Cherokee lore and mythology, and it depends on who you talk to within the tribe. Some of them believe in it strongly. It's not even a question of it not being there. They're there. Other people are, nah, I don't believe in that. You know, it depends on who you talk to. But what it said was that, in the particular passage that I was reading, it said that they're to help people in need, or people to warn away people who might be in danger. And I remember looking at that, and I was like, what? What? This is ridiculous. This is not, you know, I definitely can't tell anybody about this now, but I picked up the phone and called my buddy Ben Bailey.
The trick, go down here and go to the other side of the creek and sneak up, staying low till you get to this side of that big rock.
Yeah.
That helps form the trough.
Yeah.
And just dabble one over into the trough between the foam.
Yeah.
My biggest Rocky Fork trout came out of that trough right there, so I named it the Hog Trough. But it wasn't a brookie, it was about a 14-inch stock rainbow.
Living here most of your life, going back generations, you've had the opportunity to fish not only in East Tennessee, but a large part of the Great Smoky Mountains and all these surrounding areas. And over the time we've known each other, we've started telling each other stories.
True.
Some of them are absolutely true. And one of those stories I shared with you a few months back was my story of my encounter in Forney Creek about some voices I heard. And after I told you that story, there was a moment of silence between us. And between two old fishermen, a moment of silence generally means, boy, have I got something to tell you. When I told you this story, you were the second person I had told, because I was very hesitant to let that be known of what I experienced. So when you told me what happened to you, it gave me a sense of, whew, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. You know, I hadn't known you all that long when you originally told me.
It's a very personal story, isn't it? It's something that.
Well, you know that if you, depending on who you tell it to, you're either going to be received with a big dose of skepticism, or it's going to be somebody who can relate in some way or takes you seriously. I'll throw something out there like, well, I had something really strange happen to me up where Bone Valley Creek comes into Hazel Creek on a backpacking / fishing photographing trip one time. On the last day that we were there, unbeknownst to us, there was an event taking place. One of the traditions for the Bone Valley Baptist Church there on Hazel Creek was family members would come in a few days before Decoration Day and they would clear every blade of grass, and then they would create mounds at each gravesite about 4 inches high and 4 inches across between the headstone and the footstone. Mm-hmm. And then on Decoration Day, that's where they placed the flowers. And then on Sunday, when they had the actual ceremony, and all the people were kind of ferried in little side-by-side vehicles and four-wheel vehicles up to the top of the ridge to the cemetery. That evening, after everybody had left the valley, we were the only 4 people in the Hazel Creek Valley. We knew that. Most people left on Sunday to catch the ferry back across the lake, and so we knew we were the only ones still there. We decided to go back up and check it out. So my then girlfriend and I were standing at the upper end of the cemetery. It was kind of on a slope. Mm-hmm. And this cemetery was probably a quarter acre in size, I'll say. And we were at the upper end of this sloped cemetery plot. And my brother and his girlfriend were at the lower end. And we were just looking at the graves and reading the tombstones that still had, inscriptions on them, mm-hmm. and checking it out, photographing. And while we were at the upper end, all of a sudden I heard laughter, and it was the unmistakable laughter of children. There's fish in here, but sometimes, the fish need to win. And I think this is one of those times. You know what I'm gonna blame it on? I'm gonna blame it on this bamboo rod. Yeah, bamboo is slow. I usually fish graphite. I brought out the vintage stuff today because I thought it'd be kind of cool. I wanted to show you my bamboo rod. But your reaction time has to be 50 times faster with a slow bamboo rod than it does a graphite rod, which is what I usually fish with. How's that for an excuse? So we heard children laughing and kind of singing. It sounded exactly like if you were maybe 100 yards away from a school playground, is what it sounded like.
Oh,
and I looked at my friend, she looked at me, and I said, "You hear that?" And she said, "Yeah, I was just about to ask if you heard that." I looked down at the other end of the cemetery at my brother, and he and his girlfriend were both kind of frozen and doing the same thing, kind of looking at each other and listening. And I said, "Hey, are you guys hearing that?" And both of them just kind of nodded. And then within half a minute to a minute, it sounded like they shifted from that direction, which was south of the cemetery, around to east of the cemetery where Bone Valley Creek was, the Bone Valley itself. And that was really strange. It's like they just shifted with the wind. I know that sounds kind of woo, but that's how it was. Went back down the ridge. Campsite was right near where the old church was. That's the Bone Valley campsite. Getting the fire going, making supper, and we're sitting around. Nobody had mentioned what had happened in the cemetery. And we're sitting around eating our wonderful freeze-dried meals and just kind of BSing and talking. And I think we all were wondering who was going to bring it up first. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my brother actually said, "Well, what do y'all think that was up there?" The spiritual side of me thinks that it was the spirits of the kids that are buried in that cemetery, and fully 20-25% of the graves up there were children, and that they were ecstatic that their descendants had come to pay tribute through the decoration day.
They were celebrating.
They were celebrating. These spirits were happy, and they were celebrating that their descendants had come to pay homage and tribute to them. And like you, I haven't told very many people about that episode, but I did tell a Cherokee woman right after she gave a presentation at a Cherokee Heritage Festival over in Elizabethton a few years ago. And she just kind of grinned and had this look of knowing on her face as I was telling the story. She was just kind of grinning, and you could see in her eyes, it was like, yeah, that's real. You know, that's the real thing. We've experienced that many times, you know, on the reservation. And she said, but it's quite an honor for a non-Cherokee to have that kind of experience. And so, to be honest, I've been kind of torn between the two versions. If it was spirits of the children that were buried in that cemetery, or if it was maybe what the Cherokee call the little people. The most famous brook trout guide and fisherman of these parts, he's not with us anymore, a guy named Todd Burleson from up in Roan Mountain. You know what he fished? Size 8s and 10s.
That's huge.
And he always swore that brook trout were so opportunistic, when they saw a big bushy fly, size 8 or 10, they couldn't resist it. My reason for fishing larger flies, which I usually fish a 10 or a 12 myself, I'm fishing a 12 today, is because I can't see them anymore.
Exactly my thing, man.
Here's my net, Joe. Maybe drop it down there and see if he'll swim into it.
You got a line on it?
While I was trying to decide how to get to the bottom of this mystery, if that's what you want to call it, or whatever it is, I had an acquaintance I know that I met that I trusted, and I called him up. He's part of the nations, and I told him the story. And his first, he goes, you know, I hadn't even finished the story, and he goes, so you had an encounter with the little people, huh? And I was like, man, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what the sound was and what was going on out there. And he goes, listen, I don't buy into most of that stuff. A lot of people that I do know, he said, let me put you in touch with a storyteller who's very knowledgeable about Cherokee folklore, mythology, or history, however which way you want to put it. I don't want to put any doubts on any form of what people believe. I just want to figure out what happened.
We are going to Cherokee, North Carolina, specifically on the Cherokee Indian Reservation. And we have been given the honor of talking to Kathy Littlejohn, a Cherokee storyteller who has many, many talks on YouTube, nationally renowned, if not world renowned. She is going to give us some information on the little people. We have to be very, very careful in what we talk about. She is honoring us by talking to us about it, and just ask some questions and just get some background on what her thoughts on my experience on Forney Creek in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Storytelling is so tied in to everything. So I've been lucky enough to be invited to the Smithsonian and to Colonial Williamsburg. It just became a passion of mine, and I collect as many stories as I can because a lot of them are not written down. So if I don't record them and keep them and pass them on in some form or another, I'm afraid that we'll lose them. I'm sometimes surprised at how many we've kept, despite all of the obstacles and the barriers.
All those things coming together at once. One thing's okay, two things a coincidence, 3, 4, 5 things.
That's not a coincidence.
It's not a coincidence.
No.
Right? It's not a coincidence.
No.
spiritual,
Yeah.
weird, surreal happened to me. Yeah, if you could just tell me a few things about it.
Sure. In English, we call them little people, and they are the protectors in the woods. What happened to you was the only way they had to get you to leave. Something was going to happen. It's rare for you to see physical evidence because they're beyond fast. So they deliberately left that footprint, I believe, for you. Now this book, it's called Cherokee Little People Were Real. At Western Carolina University, they dug up a mound in order to place a building there. They interviewed the workers, the heavy equipment operators, the construction workers. He said on the campus, they dug a trench. This is before they tore the mound down. And while they were digging, they ran into a lot of those little tunnels. How big were they? About 24 inches. So they explored these tunnels. Someone found what they thought was the skull of a child. And I don't know if the professor found it or it was given to him, but it was on his desk for years. And one day, this woman, maybe an anthropologist, walked by and she said, "You know, that's the first child skull I've ever seen with a full set of teeth and wisdom teeth."
Look at that fish. Well, we can catch that one. There you go. So they're hitting in here. So it's just a question of them getting used to what the bait is. Looks like a typical stocked. It's a typical stock brook trout. I don't want to fight him too much in this weather. Get him back in there so we don't hurt him. There we go. Yeah, he's good.
That was my Hazel Creek experience. And you don't fish in these mountains alone without coming across things you can't explain. If you ever talk to a Cherokee person about this, you find out real quick they take it seriously.
It's very serious, yeah.
It's deeply woven into their heritage and history, and they don't look at that as legend or lore.
No.
They look at that as true history and a true heritage. And
There could be 1,000 explanations for what we experienced, but to me personally, and I think to you personally too, there was something there that I could not explain. I could not do it. I was honored with this experience. Is it life-changing? Do you I look at things differently now. You know what Kathy Littlejohn told me? It was almost right from the beginning of the interview. She looked at me and goes,
Number one, you're not crazy. I'm sure you thought I'm going crazy, or when I tell people about this, they're gonna think I'm crazy. No.
I needed to hear that. I needed to hear it.
If you've spent time in our mountains and you're open to it, you come to the realization there is some type of magic, some type of spirit alive and well. You know, you talk to some people who've spent days, weeks, months in the Smokies. They've never even seen a wild animal. Why? They're everywhere. I truly believe that if you slow down, get back, get your mountain ears, stay quiet, the sounds, the bird chirping becomes louder. You hear the wind blowing through the trees. You hear little rustles in the leaves. You start to be more in touch with your surroundings. I'm not saying you're going to have an experience with little people. I'm not saying that. But the chances of you having an encounter that's memorable, that you say, hey, I was in Eagle Creek and I had this bear encounter, or a deer walked right up to my camera. If you have an open mind and you're in tune with what's going around you in the wilderness, that's when those things happen to you.